Listen to me carefully, and I don't know how long you have been carrying that burden. I don't know how many nights you smiled in front of people while quietly asking yourself, how much longer can I keep going? And maybe you're tired of trying, and tired of waiting, and tired of watching other people move forward while you feel like your own life is standing still. But I came to remind you of something today, and your exhaustion is not the end of your story. And God sees the moments nobody else sees. And God sees the tears you never explained. And God sees the effort that nobody applauded. And God sees you getting up every morning and continuing even when your heart is tired and your mind is telling you to quit. And maybe right now you're wondering, God, when is it going to be my turn? And when will the opportunity come? And when will the door finally open? And when will something finally change? And when will I finally experience the life I've been working and waiting for? And I want you to hear this with everything inside of you. And your turn is coming. And not because everything has suddenly become easy, and not because you will never struggle again, but because the season you're in does not have the authority to decide the entire story of your life. And you may be tired, but you're not finished. And you may be delayed, but you are not denied. And you may be standing in a season where nothing seems to be happening, but that does not mean God is doing nothing. And sometimes the greatest changes begin where nobody can see them. And before the world sees the result, there is a season when you have to keep believing. And before the opportunity arrives, there is preparation. And before the door opens, there is growth. And before the victory becomes visible, there is a moment when you have to decide, and I will not quit. And so if you're listening to me right now and you're tired, don't be ashamed of it. And you are human. And you have carried things that were heavy. And you have survived disappointments that changed you. And you have been rejected. And you have been overlooked. And you have given your best and still didn't get the result you wanted. But hear me, and what happened yesterday does not have the final word over tomorrow. And God can take a season of waiting and turn it into preparation. And God can take rejection and turn it into redirection. And God can take disappointment and use it to build strength inside you. And then one day you may look back at this exact season and realize, and I thought God had forgotten me, but he was preparing me. And so don't leave this message too early, and stay with me. And because I want to speak directly to the person who is tired of waiting, and the person who feels forgotten, and the person who is wondering whether their dreams will ever become reality, and the person who keeps asking, when will it finally be my turn? And your story is not over, and your opportunity can still come, and your life can still change, and your next chapter can still be greater than your last. And then most importantly, and you don't have to see the whole road to take the next step, and keep moving, and keep growing, and keep preparing, and keep trusting God. And because sometimes when you think you're at the end, and you're actually standing closer to your breakthrough than you have ever been, there are moments in life when you become tired in a way that sleep cannot fix. You can sleep for 8 hours and still wake up with a heavy heart. You can smile at people, answer their questions, go to work, take care of your responsibilities, and still carry a silent question inside you. God, when is it going to be my turn? Maybe nobody knows how hard you have been fighting just to keep yourself together. Maybe people see you functioning, but they don't see the emotional weight you carry when you're alone. They don't see the nights when you stare at the ceiling thinking about your future. They don't see the disappointment behind your smile when another opportunity passes you by. But God sees it, and God knows you're tired, and he knows how many times you tried again after failing. He knows how many times you encouraged yourself when nobody else encouraged you. He knows how many times you had to wipe your own tears and tell yourself, I have to keep going. And just because you are tired does not mean you're weak. Sometimes being tired is proof that you have been carrying something for a long time and still refusing to give up. And think about a person who has been searching for a job for months. Every morning they check their phone hoping for an email or a call. They apply, they wait, they follow up, and sometimes there is no response. After rejection, they begin to wonder whether they are good enough. They see someone else getting hired and start comparing their life to that person's life. They think, maybe I am not meant for this. Maybe my opportunity will never come. But what they cannot see is what may be happening behind the scenes. Every application is giving them experience. Every interview is teaching them something. Every rejection is helping them understand what they need to improve. Every day they continue is building a level of resilience that cannot be learned from comfort. And sometimes God is doing work in you before he changes what is around you. And you may be asking God for a different situation while God may be preparing a different version of you. You may be asking for the door to open while God is strengthening you so that when the door opens, you will be ready to walk through it with confidence. And look at a seed. When you put a seed into the ground, nothing appears to happen immediately. You don't see a tree the next morning. You don't see flowers the next day. From the surface, it looks like nothing is happening. But underneath the ground, something is taking place. Roots are forming. Growth is beginning. The seed is preparing for what will eventually become visible. And your life can have seasons like that. And you may look at your circumstances and say, nothing is happening, but never confuse what you cannot see with what is not happening. And there are things developing inside you that you will only recognize later. And the patience you're developing, and the strength you're building, and the wisdom you're gaining, and the discipline you're learning, and the ability to say no, and the courage to start again, and the confidence to walk away from what no longer serves your purpose. And all of these things matter. And one day you may look back and realize that the season you hated was actually the season that made you stronger. And maybe you lost something you desperately wanted. Maybe someone walked away from you. Maybe a plan you believed in completely fell apart. At the time, it felt like your world was ending. But years later, you may discover that losing that opportunity created room for something you never would have chosen for yourself. And that is why you cannot judge your entire story from one chapter. And you cannot look at one difficult month and decide that your whole life will be difficult. And you cannot look at one rejection and decide that nobody will ever choose you. And you cannot look at one failure and decide that you are a failure. And you cannot look at today's circumstances and assume they are tomorrow's circumstances, and your life is still unfolding. And so if you are tired today, breathe and take a moment. And you don't have to have every answer tonight. And you don't have to know exactly how everything will work out. And sometimes all you need to do is take the next step and get up tomorrow and try again and send the application and make the phone call and study one more hour and start the business again and write the idea down and improve the skill and have the difficult conversation and take care of yourself and do what you can with what you have. And trust God with what you cannot control. And because being tired does not mean you should stop. And sometimes you simply need to rest without surrendering your dream. And there is a difference between resting and quitting. And rest when you need to rest. And cry if you need to cry. And take a breath and give yourself permission to recover. But don't bury your future just because your present is difficult. And God has not forgotten you simply because the answer has not arrived yet. And you may not understand the timing. And you may not understand the delay. And you may not understand why the road has been harder than you expected. But you don't have to understand everything to keep moving. And there is still more ahead of you. And there are still opportunities you haven't seen. And there are still people you haven't met. And there are still places you haven't reached. And there are still versions of yourself you haven't discovered. And so don't let today's exhaustion convince you that tomorrow has nothing to offer. And your story is still being written. And perhaps the very thing you're waiting for is closer than you realize. And keep going. And not because you never get tired, but because your tiredness does not get to decide your destiny. And God sees you, and God knows your heart, and God knows the effort nobody applauded, and God knows the battles nobody knew you were fighting. And if you can keep moving, keep growing, keep preparing, and keep trusting Him through this season, you may one day look back and say, and I thought God had forgotten me. And I thought nothing was happening, and I thought my turn would never come. But God was working in ways I couldn't see. And so don't give up on your future because of a difficult present. And you're tired, but you're still here. And as long as you're still here, there is still another morning, another opportunity, another chance, another step, and another chapter waiting for you. And your turn is coming. And keep your heart ready for it. And there's something difficult about waiting because waiting forces you to believe in something you cannot see yet. When you work hard and immediately see results, it is easy to stay motivated. But when you work, pray, prepare, sacrifice, and keep moving without seeing the outcome, that is when your patience is tested. You begin asking questions. How long? When will it happen? Why is everyone else moving forward while I am still here? And sometimes the hardest part is not the waiting itself. The hardest part is watching other people receive what you've been asking God for. And you see someone get the job you wanted. Someone else launches the business you dreamed about. Someone else reaches a goal while you are still trying to figure out your next step. And suddenly their success starts making you question your own journey. But listen carefully. Someone else's timing is not evidence that God has forgotten yours. And just because somebody else arrived before you does not mean you are late. And think about a farmer. A farmer does not plant a seed in the morning and dig it up in the afternoon because he cannot see a tree. He understands that growth takes time. He prepares the soil, plants the seed, gives it water, protects it, and waits. There is a period when the ground looks exactly the same as it did before the seed was planted, but the farmer doesn't say nothing is happening. He understands that some growth happens underneath the surface before it becomes visible above the ground. And your waiting season can be like that. And you may not see the results yet, but you may be developing qualities that you will need for the future you are asking God to give you. And maybe you are learning patience because your future will require you to handle pressure without giving up. And maybe you are learning discipline because your next opportunity will require consistency. And maybe you are learning confidence because you have spent too much of your life allowing other people's opinions to control your decisions. And maybe you are learning how to stand alone because not everyone who starts the journey with you will be there when you reach the destination. And don't underestimate what is happening inside you while you're waiting for something to happen around you. And there was a person who spent years trying to find the right career. Every time they applied somewhere, they heard no. They watched friends move ahead. Some people even asked them, "What are you doing with your life?" Those questions hurt because they already had those questions in their own mind. But instead of allowing the waiting period to destroy them, they used it to learn. They took courses, they practiced new skills, they improved their communication, they learned from every interview. They became better than they were the year before, and then one day an opportunity appeared. And suddenly all those months of preparation made sense, and the waiting had not been wasted. And the rejection had not been completely meaningless, and the quiet period had prepared them to recognize and handle the opportunity when it arrived. And that is why you should never assume that a slow season is an empty season. And sometimes God uses waiting to build a person who can carry what they are asking for. And because what if you received everything you wanted before you were ready for it? And what if the success came before you developed the discipline to maintain it? And what if the money arrived before you learned how to manage it? And what if the opportunity came before you had the confidence to step into it? And what if the platform became bigger before your character became stronger? And sometimes you are asking God, why haven't you given it to me yet? And the answer may be, because I am preparing you for it. And you don't have to like the waiting. And you don't have to pretend that waiting is easy. And you can admit that you're frustrated. And you can admit that you're disappointed. And you can admit that you wish things were moving faster. But don't allow frustration to make you abandon the very thing you have been preparing for. And there is a difference between being delayed and being defeated. And a delay is not a denial of your entire future. And your current chapter is not your final destination. And think about an airplane sitting on the runway. From the passenger's perspective, it can feel like nothing is happening. You're sitting there, you're waiting, you're looking out the window, or you're wondering when the plane will finally move. But the plane is not staying on the runway forever, and it is preparing. And when the moment comes, it doesn't slowly crawl into the sky, it accelerates. And your life can have moments like that. And you may feel like you're stuck on the runway right now. You may wonder why you're not moving as quickly as you want, but use this time. Prepare, learn, grow, strengthen yourself. And because when your opportunity comes, you don't want to spend your first day preparing for it, and you want to be ready. And so stop measuring your progress only by visible results, and measure yourself by who you are becoming. And are you stronger than you were last year? And are you wiser than you were before? And are you more disciplined? And are you better at handling rejection? And are you more confident? And are you more focused? And if the answer is yes, then something is happening and you are growing. And growth is progress even when nobody can see it. And so while you wait, don't waste the waiting. And don't spend every day complaining about the door that hasn't opened. And use the time to become ready for the door that will. And keep learning. And keep improving, and keep preparing, and keep believing. And then most importantly, keep trusting God's timing even when you don't understand it. And one day you may look back at this season and realize that you are not being punished by the delay. You are being prepared by it. And the lonely days taught you strength, and the rejection taught you resilience, and the waiting taught you patience, and the struggle taught you wisdom. And the silence taught you how to keep moving without constant applause. And so if you're waiting right now, don't assume that your life has stopped. And something can be happening even when you cannot see it. And your roots may be growing before your branches appear. And your preparation may be happening before your opportunity arrives. And your character may be developing before your success becomes visible. And your next chapter may already be closer than you think. And don't rush what God is preparing. And don't compare your timeline with somebody else's. And don't destroy your peace because someone else got there first. And your journey has its own timing. And your story has its own process. And your opportunity has its own season. And when your turn comes, you will understand why you had to become the person you are becoming right now. And so keep going. And keep preparing. And keep trusting, and keep becoming, and because the waiting season is not the end of your story. And it may be the preparation for the moment you've been waiting for all along. And there is a quiet thief that can steal your peace without making a sound. It does not knock on your door. It does not announce when it arrives. It simply enters your mind and whispers, look at them. They are ahead of you. Look at what they have. Look at what they achieve. Look at how their life is moving while yours is still waiting. That thief is comparison. And if you are not careful, comparison can make you forget everything God has already brought you through. And you can be making progress and still feel like a failure because you are measuring your life against someone else's highlight reel. You can be growing, learning, becoming stronger, and moving forward, yet still feel behind because you keep looking sideways instead of looking at your own path. And listen to me carefully. God did not create your journey to look exactly like somebody else's. And you don't have to arrive at the same time. And you don't have to have the same opportunities. And you don't have to experience success in the same way. And you certainly don't have to measure your worth by someone else's progress. And think about two trees planted in different places. One tree may receive sunlight earlier in the morning. Another may receive more rain. One may grow quickly, while the other takes longer. You would never stand in front of the slower growing tree and say, you are worthless because you are not growing like that tree. And no. And you understand that every tree has its own environment, its own conditions, its own process. And so why do you expect your life to develop according to somebody else's timeline? And maybe you look at someone who is your age and think they already have a successful career. And maybe someone you know has bought a house, started a business, built a huge audience, or achieved something you've been trying to achieve for years. And instead of celebrating their progress, you start questioning your own value. And you think, what is wrong with me? But what if nothing is wrong with you? And what if your journey simply requires a different process? And what if the season you're in is teaching you something that their season isn't teaching them? And you don't know the full story behind somebody else's success. You see the result, but you don't see every sacrifice. You see the celebration, but you don't see the lonely nights. You see the photograph, but you don't see the years of preparation behind it. And social media makes comparison even more dangerous because people usually show you the best 5 seconds of their lives and you compare it to the hardest 5 years of yours. And someone posts a new car and you look at your old car and feel unsuccessful. And someone posts a beautiful house and you look at your small apartment and feel like you haven't accomplished anything. and someone announces a promotion. And you look at your current job and wonder why you're still there, but you don't know their complete story, and they don't know yours. And your value was never determined by what someone else has, and your worth was never measured by how quickly another person reached their destination. And God did not make a mistake when he gave you your timeline. And maybe you're 25 and think you're behind. And maybe you're 35 and feel like you should have achieved more. And maybe you're 45 and wondering whether it's too late to begin again. And listen to me, and it is not too late to become who you were created to become. And there are people who discover their purpose later in life. And there are people who build successful businesses after years of failure. And there are people who change careers when they thought their opportunity had passed. And there are people who begin again after losing everything. And your age does not automatically cancel your future. And your past does not automatically cancel your potential. And somebody else's success does not cancel your opportunity. And think about a race. If you are running your race and constantly turning your head to see who is beside you, you can lose your balance. The runner who wants to finish strong has to keep their eyes on their own lane. And that's what you have to do. And stay in your lane. And not because you don't care about other people, but because your energy is too valuable to spend constantly measuring yourself against them. And celebrate somebody else's victory without turning it into evidence of your failure. And be happy for someone else's breakthrough without assuming yours will never come. And their chapter does not close your book. And their opportunity does not steal yours. And their success does not make you unsuccessful. And you can clap for them and still believe that God has something for you. And sometimes comparison doesn't just make you jealous of what someone else has, it makes you rush your own process. And you start making decisions because you feel behind. And you take opportunities that don't fit your purpose because you want to prove something. And you chase money because someone else is making more. And you chase popularity because someone else has attention. And you chase relationships because everyone around you seems settled. And suddenly you are living a life designed to impress people instead of a life aligned with your purpose. And don't do that. And don't let somebody else's timeline pressure you into making choices that your future self will regret. And there is freedom in understanding that you don't have to compete with everybody. And you only have to keep becoming better than the person you were yesterday. And if yesterday you were afraid and today you took one step forward, that's progress. And if yesterday you didn't believe in yourself and today you tried again, that's progress. And if yesterday you gave up quickly and today you stayed consistent, that's progress. And maybe your progress isn't visible to the world yet. And that's okay. And not every victory needs an audience. And some of the greatest victories happen quietly. And you learn to control your emotions. And you learn to manage your money. And you learn a new skill. And you become disciplined. And you stop chasing people who don't value you. And you begin respecting yourself. And you start trusting God again. And those changes may not receive applause, but they are transforming your life. And so stop looking at somebody else's clock and wondering why your time hasn't arrived, and your journey is not late, and your story is not finished, and your path is not supposed to look like theirs. And there is something uniquely yours about the road you're walking. And maybe one day someone will look at your life and think, I wish I had what they have. But they won't know what you had to overcome to get there. And they won't know the waiting. And they won't know the tears. And they won't know the uncertainty. And they won't know how many times you almost quit. And so don't judge your journey while you're still in the middle of it. And keep walking. And keep growing. And keep preparing. And keep trusting God. And when you feel tempted to compare yourself to someone else, remind yourself, and their journey is theirs. My journey is mine. Their timing is theirs. My timing is mine. And God has not forgotten me. And you don't need to become somebody else to have a meaningful life. And you don't need to live somebody else's story. And you don't need to arrive when they arrive. And you simply need to keep moving toward what God has placed in front of you. And your turn does not disappear because someone else's turn came first. And your blessing does not become smaller because someone else received theirs. And your future is still waiting for you. And so lift your head and stop looking sideways and stop counting somebody else's victories and stop using their success to measure your worth. And look forward. And your road is still open. And your story is still being written. And the God who knows exactly where you are also knows exactly where you are going. And trust your journey. Stay in your lane. Keep moving. Your time can still come. Sometimes the hardest thing to accept is that the door you desperately wanted to walk through may be the very door that was never meant to stay open. You prayed for it, you worked for it, you waited for it. You imagined your future on the other side of it, and then suddenly it closed. And maybe you didn't get the job, and maybe the person you wanted in your life walked away, and maybe the business failed. And maybe the opportunity disappeared, and maybe a plan you had spent years building collapsed in a single moment. And when that happens, your first question may be, God, why? And why did you let this happen? And why didn't you stop it? And why did you allow me to get so close only to watch it disappear? But sometimes you have to understand something that is difficult while you're standing in the middle of disappointment, and a closed door does not always mean your life is going in the wrong direction. Sometimes it means God is redirecting you towards something you could not see. And think about driving on a road and suddenly seeing a barrier in front of you. Your first reaction might be frustration. You may think, why can't I go this way? But then you discover that the road ahead is damaged, dangerous, or completely blocked. The barrier that frustrated you was actually protecting you from going somewhere you didn't need to go. And life can be like that. And you can spend months trying to make something work, only to realize later that the closed door saved you from years of pain. And there are people who once cried because they lost a relationship, only to eventually realize that staying in that relationship would have prevented them from becoming the person they needed to become. And there are people who were devastated after losing a job, only to discover a new career that gave them more freedom and purpose. And there are people whose business failed, but the failure forced them to learn skills they later used to build something stronger. And at the moment of loss, they couldn't see the bigger picture. And all they could see was the door closing. And that's what makes disappointment so painful. And you can only see what is happening right now. And God can see what you cannot. And you see the ending. And God sees the next chapter. And you see the rejection, and God sees the redirection, and you see the loss, and God sees what can grow from it. And that doesn't mean every painful experience feels good. It doesn't mean you should pretend rejection doesn't hurt. It hurts, and you are allowed to be disappointed, and you are allowed to grieve what you wanted, and you are allowed to say, I don't understand this. But don't let a closed door convince you that there are no doors left. And one closed door is not the end of the building, and one rejection is not the end of your potential, and one failure is not the end of your future. And one person leaving does not mean you will always be alone. And one opportunity disappearing does not mean opportunities have disappeared forever. And sometimes the door you wanted was too small for where you're going. And imagine someone applying for a position they desperately wanted. They prepare for the interview. They research the company. They practice their answers. They walk into the room believing this could finally be their breakthrough. And then they receive an email, and we decided to move forward with another candidate. And it hurts. And they feel embarrassed. And they question themselves, and they wonder if they are good enough. But 3 months later, another company contacts them. The position is better. The salary is higher. The environment is healthier. The opportunity gives them room to grow. And suddenly they look back and realize, and I thought the rejection was the end. It was actually a redirection. And that is why you cannot always interpret your present situation with your present emotions. And your emotions tell you how something feels. And they don't always tell you what something means. And you may feel rejected, but that doesn't mean you are rejected by life. And you may feel delayed, but that doesn't mean you are forgotten. And you may feel lost, but that doesn't mean you have no direction. And sometimes you simply need to keep walking until the new road becomes visible. And then here's what I want you to understand, and stop begging for doors that God has already closed. And if someone walked away, don't spend your entire life chasing them. And if an opportunity disappeared, don't destroy yourself trying to force it back. And if a plan failed, don't assume you must rebuild the exact same plan. And sometimes your greatest mistake is trying to reopen something that God is trying to help you release. And there is a difference between persistence and desperation. And persistence says, I will continue pursuing my purpose. And desperation says, I will force this particular thing to happen, even if it destroys my peace. And don't confuse the two. And you can keep believing in your future without insisting that it must happen exactly the way you imagined. And maybe your plan was good. And maybe your dream was real. But perhaps the route to that dream needs to change. And that's okay. And sometimes God doesn't change the destination, and he changes the road. And so if a door closed recently, don't sit in front of it forever. And take a breath and learn what the experience taught you. And take the wisdom, and take the growth, and take the lesson. And then turn around and look for the next door. And you may be surprised by what you find. And because sometimes the door you were crying over was blocking your view of the door that was waiting behind you. And your future is bigger than one rejection. And your identity is bigger than one failure. And your potential is bigger than one disappointment. And your life is bigger than one closed chapter. And so don't let disappointment become your permanent address. And get up and wipe your tears. And take what you learned and move forward, and trust God enough to believe that if one door closes, he can guide you toward another. And you don't need to understand everything today, and you just need enough courage to take the next step. And one day you may look back at the door that broke your heart and say, and now I understand why it had to close. And what felt like rejection may have been protection. And what felt like an ending may have been preparation. And what felt like a setback may have been a setup for something greater. And so stop asking, why did that door close? And start asking God, where are you leading me now? And because your story is not over. And the road continues. And there are still possibilities ahead. And there are still opportunities you haven't seen. And there may be a door waiting for you that you never knew existed. And keep walking. And keep trusting, and keep preparing. And the door that closed does not have the power to close your entire future. And sometimes God closes one door because he knows the next door is where your life is supposed to change. And there are moments when you feel like you have reached the end of your strength. You have tried again and again. You have waited. You have worked. You have believed. You have kept showing up, even when nobody noticed. And now you are asking yourself, what is the point? Maybe I should just stop. But sometimes the moment when you feel most exhausted is not the moment to quit. Sometimes it is the moment when you need to pause, breathe, and remind yourself why you started. And you may be much closer than you think. And think about a person climbing a mountain. Imagine they have been walking for hours. Their legs are hurting. Their breathing is heavy. They are exhausted. They look ahead and see more rocks, more distance, and more climbing. They think, I can't do this anymore. But what they don't know is that the top may be just around the next turn. And if they quit at that moment, they may never discover how close they were. And life can be exactly like that. And you can spend years working towards something and reach a point where you feel absolutely exhausted. You may think nothing is changing because the result isn't visible yet. But your effort may be accumulating in ways you cannot see. And every application you send is experience. And every rejection teaches you something. And every mistake gives you information. And every difficult day builds resilience. And every time you choose to continue, you become stronger than the version of yourself that wanted to quit. And don't underestimate the value of continuing. And think about someone learning a new skill. In the beginning, everything feels exciting. They watch tutorials, practice every day, and imagine how good they will become. But after a few weeks, progress slows down, and they make mistakes, and they forget things, and they become frustrated, and they look at people who are already experts and think, I'll never be that good. And this is where many people quit, and not because they cannot succeed, but because they expect progress to happen in a straight line, and real growth isn't always obvious. And sometimes you practice for days and feel like nothing changed. Then one day, something clicks, and you suddenly understand what confused you before. And you suddenly perform a task that once felt impossible, and you suddenly realize that all those frustrating hours were building something inside you. And that is why you cannot judge your progress only by what you can see today. And sometimes growth is happening quietly. And sometimes your biggest breakthrough begins with your decision not to give up. And think about an athlete preparing for a competition. Nobody sees every early morning workout. Nobody sees the discipline required when they don't feel motivated. Nobody sees the days when their body is sore and their mind is telling them to stay in bed. And people see the final performance, and they see the medal, and they see the celebration. But they don't see the thousands of small decisions that came before it. And your life can be the same. And people may eventually see your success, but they won't see every time you wanted to quit and chose to continue. And they won't see the nights you stayed awake planning your future. And they won't see the mornings you got up despite disappointment. And they won't see the applications that were rejected. And they won't see the opportunities that disappeared. And they won't see how many times you had to encourage yourself. But God sees, and God sees the effort behind the result. And when you feel tired, remember that you don't have to finish the entire journey today. And you only have to take the next step. And sometimes we quit because we are trying to carry tomorrow's problems today. And we think about everything that could go wrong. And we think about how far we still have to go. And we think about how difficult the journey will be. And suddenly the weight becomes overwhelming. And instead, ask yourself, and what can I do today? And maybe today you can make one phone call. And maybe you can send one application. And maybe you can study one chapter. And maybe you can practice for 30 minutes. And maybe you can write one page. And maybe you can take one step toward your goal. And don't underestimate one step. And one step repeated every day can take you somewhere you never imagined. And a person who walks 1 mile every day eventually travels hundreds of miles. And a person who saves a small amount consistently can eventually build something meaningful. And a person who learns one new skill at a time can eventually become highly capable. And small actions don't look powerful in the moment. But consistency makes them powerful. And so when you're tired, don't make a permanent decision based on a temporary feeling. And rest if you need to. And take a break and recover. But don't throw away your dreams simply because you're exhausted today. And there is a difference between saying, I need to rest, and saying, I will never try again. And rest is not quitting. And slowing down is not failure. And changing your strategy is not surrender. And sometimes you need to stop and ask God for direction instead of forcing yourself to continue in the same way. And maybe the answer isn't to quit. And maybe the answer to change the method and try a different approach and learn something new and ask for help and improve your skills and adjust the plan, but keep moving towards your purpose. And because your current struggle does not tell you how close you are to your next opportunity. And you could be one conversation away, and one application away, and one idea away, and one decision away, and one day away from discovering something that changes your direction. And you don't know. And because you don't know, you cannot afford to quit too early. And there are doors you haven't reached yet. And there are people you haven't met yet. And there are opportunities you haven't discovered yet. And there are versions of yourself you haven't become yet. And so keep going. And not blindly, and not recklessly, but faithfully and intentionally. And trust God while you do your part. And prepare while you wait. And work while you believe. And learn while you struggle. And when you feel that voice inside saying, give up, answer it with, and not today. And maybe you don't have enough strength for the entire journey. And that's okay. And find enough strength for the next step. And then take another step tomorrow. And another one after that. And one day you may look back and realize that the moment you almost quit was the moment you were closer than you had ever been. And the mountain looked impossible, because you couldn't see the top. But that doesn't mean the top wasn't there. And your breakthrough may not have arrived yet. But that doesn't mean it isn't coming. And so breathe and stand up and keep moving and trust God and keep preparing and keep believing. And because you have survived every difficult day that brought you this far. And don't let one difficult day convince you that you cannot survive the next one. And your story is still being written, and your future is still open. And the chapter you're struggling through today may be the very chapter that makes your victory tomorrow meaningful. And don't quit just because you are tired. And you may be closer than you think. And there is a difference between waiting for something to happen and preparing yourself for what you are believing will happen. Many people spend their lives saying, When my opportunity comes, I will be ready. But the truth is, opportunity often arrives before you feel ready. And the people who are able to recognize it and take advantage of it are usually the ones who prepared when nobody was watching. And maybe you have been asking God for a better job, a better future financial stability, a new opportunity, or a completely different chapter in your life. You keep saying, God, when will my turn come? But while you're waiting for the answer, there is another question you need to ask yourself. And what am I doing to prepare for my turn? And because you don't want to spend years praying for a door to open and then discover that you are not prepared to walk through it. And imagine someone who wants to become a successful photographer. They keep saying, one day I'm going to have amazing clients. But every time they have free time, they do nothing to improve their photography. They don't practice. They don't study lighting. They don't learn editing. They don't build a portfolio. And then one day a major opportunity appears and someone asks them to photograph an important event. And suddenly the dream they've been talking about becomes real. But now they panic and they aren't ready. And the opportunity wasn't the problem. And the preparation was missing. And that is why your waiting season matters. And if you are waiting for something bigger, use this season to become bigger. And if you're waiting for a better job, improve your skills. And if you're waiting for a business opportunity, learn how business works. And if you're waiting for financial growth, learn how to manage what you already have. And if you're waiting for a larger audience, improve your communication and your content. And if you're waiting for a new chapter, become the person who can handle that chapter. And don't just pray for the opportunity, and prepare for it. And sometimes we ask God for a destination without preparing ourselves for the journey. And we say, God, give me success. But are we disciplined enough to handle success? And we say, God, give me money. But can we manage money responsibly? And we say, God, give me influence. But can we handle criticism? And we say, God, open the door. But are we developing the courage to walk through it? And preparation is how you tell yourself that you believe your future is worth getting ready for. And think about a student preparing for an important exam. The student doesn't wait until the teacher says the exam begins now, and then open the book for the first time. And they study beforehand, and they review, and they practice, and they make mistakes, and they learn, and they prepare. And then when the exam arrives, they don't have to panic because they have already invested in themselves. And your opportunity can be like that exam. And you don't know exactly when it will arrive. But you can decide to be ready anyway. And maybe you're waiting for a phone call. And maybe you're waiting for a business opportunity. And maybe you're waiting for someone to recognize your talent. And maybe you're waiting for your financial situation to change. And while you wait, don't sit still. And build. And learn and practice and improve and strengthen yourself. And because preparation creates confidence. And confidence doesn't mean believing that you will never fail. And confidence means knowing that you've done the work. And you can walk into a room differently when you know you prepared. And you can face an interview differently when you have practiced your answers. And you can start a business differently when you've studied your market. And you can speak differently when you've developed your communication skills. And you can handle challenges differently when you've trained yourself to stay calm under pressure. And preparation doesn't guarantee that everything will go perfectly. But it increases your ability to respond when something changes. And sometimes your opportunity won't look like what you imagined. And you might be waiting for one particular door while God is preparing another. And that's why you need to prepare yourself broadly.
Develop skills.
And develop character. And develop patience. And develop discipline. And develop confidence. And develop wisdom. And because you don't know exactly what form your next opportunity will take. And a person who spends years learning how to communicate can use that skill in a job, a business, a presentation, a social platform, or a completely unexpected opportunity. And a person who learns discipline can use it anywhere. And a person who develops courage can carry it into every room. And the work you do today may prepare you for something you haven't even imagined yet. And so stop saying, I'm waiting for my chance, and start saying, I'm getting ready for my chance. And there is power in that mindset. And because when you prepare, you stop feeling completely helpless. And you realize that there are things you can control. And you can control whether you learn. And you can control whether you practice. And you can control whether you improve. And you can control whether you show up. And you can control whether you keep moving. And you cannot control exactly when your opportunity arrives, but you can control whether you're ready when it does. And don't underestimate small preparation. And 30 minutes of learning today can become hours of knowledge over time. And one page written today can become a book later. And one skill practiced today can become a career tomorrow. And one disciplined decision today can change your entire direction. And your future doesn't always change through one giant decision. And sometimes it changes through hundreds of small decisions that nobody notices. And so while you're waiting, don't waste your days asking when, and ask, what can I do today? And what can you learn? And what can you improve? And what can you practice? And what can you stop doing? And what can you start doing? And what can you prepare? And because your turn may come when you least expect it. And when it comes, you don't want to say, I wish I had been ready. And you want to say, and I've been preparing for this. And God knows the timing of your life. And you may not know when the opportunity will arrive. And you may not know what it will look like. And you may not know who will open the door. But you can trust God enough to prepare while you wait. And don't sit around waiting for your life to begin. And your preparation is already part of your life. And your growth is already part of your story. And your discipline is already building your future. And your effort matters even when nobody applauds it. And one day, the opportunity you've been waiting for may suddenly appear. And when that moment comes, don't be surprised that you are ready. And you prepared in the silence, and you practiced when nobody was watching. And you kept learning when nobody was congratulating you. And you kept going when there was no immediate reward. And then that's why, when your turn comes, you won't have to become ready overnight. And you will already be ready. And so keep preparing, and keep growing, and keep learning, and keep trusting God. And your opportunity has a time, and your season has a time. And while you cannot control the timing, you can control your preparation. And your turn is coming. And make sure you are ready when it arrives. There will be moments when you have done everything you know to do, and still nothing seems to change. You have worked hard. You have stayed patient. You have tried again. You have prepared yourself. You have waited for the opportunity. And yet you look around and wonder, God, where is the change? When will I finally see the result? And that is where trust becomes important. And it is easy to trust when everything is going your way. It is easy to believe when the phone is ringing, the opportunity has arrived, the money is coming in, and people are celebrating you. But real trust is built in the moments when you cannot see what is happening. And sometimes you have to keep walking even when you cannot see the entire road. And think about driving at night. Your headlights don't show you the entire highway. They only show you a certain distance in front of you. But you don't stop the car and say, I refuse to continue because I cannot see the next 50 miles. And you trust the road enough to keep moving. And you see the next portion and you drive through it. And then the next portion becomes visible. And then another. And that is how life can be. And God may not show you the entire plan at once. He may only give you enough light for the next step. And sometimes you want the complete map, but what you need is enough courage to take the next step. And maybe you are worried about your future. And maybe you don't know where your career is going. And maybe your finances aren't where you want them to be. And maybe you're waiting for an opportunity that hasn't arrived. And maybe you feel like everybody else knows exactly what they're doing while you are still trying to figure yourself out. And don't let uncertainty convince you that God has forgotten you. And you may not know what is coming next, but that does not mean there is nothing ahead. And think about a person who starts a small business from their home. In the beginning, there are very few customers. They spend hours working, learning, improving their products, and trying different strategies. Some days they make almost nothing. Some days nobody responds. And they could easily look at the numbers and say, this isn't working. But instead they continue learning, and they improve the product. And they listen to customers, and they become better. And months later, something changes. One customer recommends them to another. Then another person discovers their work. Slowly, the business begins to grow. And the person may look back and realize that the months when nothing seemed to be happening were actually teaching them everything they needed to know. And that's why you should never call a season useless simply because it isn't producing immediate results. And some seasons are for receiving, and some seasons are for building, and some seasons are for learning, and some seasons are for becoming stronger.
And you may be in a season where the greatest thing happening is happening inside you.
And you are becoming more patient, and you are becoming more disciplined, and you are learning how to handle disappointment, and you are learning how to stop chasing people, and you are learning how to protect your peace, and you are learning how to stand on your own. And you are learning how to trust God without needing every answer immediately. And those lessons may not look like success from the outside, but they can completely change your future. And imagine someone who receives a large amount of money before learning how to manage it. They may spend it quickly and end up in the same place, but another person may spend years learning financial discipline before their income increases significantly. When more money finally comes, they know what to do with it. And the difference was not simply the amount they received, and the difference was who they became while waiting. And maybe that's what your waiting season is doing for you. And maybe God is preparing your character before changing your circumstances. And maybe He is teaching you how to handle something you have been asking for. And maybe He is strengthening your mind because the next level will require greater responsibility. And maybe He is teaching you patience because your future cannot be built on constant impatience. And you may be saying, God, why is it taking so long? But perhaps one day you will say, now I understand why I needed that time. And there are lessons you can only learn through waiting. And there are strengths you can only develop through difficulty. And there are things you discover about yourself when you have no choice but to keep going. And so don't despise the season you're in simply because it isn't the season you wanted. And use it. And learn from it. And grow through it. And become stronger in it. And trust that your current circumstances are not necessarily your permanent circumstances, and a difficult season can change, and a closed door can lead to another opportunity, and a rejection can redirect you, and a delay can give you time to prepare, and a setback can teach you something that future success requires, and your job is not to understand every detail, and your job is to keep moving with faith and wisdom. And there will be days when you feel confident and days when you don't. And there will be mornings when you wake up motivated and nights when you wonder whether anything will ever change. And on those difficult days, remember how far you have already come. And you have already survived things you once thought would destroy you. And you have already walked through situations you thought you couldn't handle. And you have already made it through days when you didn't know how tomorrow would look. And yet you're still here. And that means your story is still moving. And so don't let a temporary delay become a permanent belief that nothing good will happen. And don't let one bad chapter convince you that the entire book is bad. And don't let one rejection convince you that you are unworthy. And don't let one failure convince you that you cannot succeed. And don't let today's uncertainty steal tomorrow's hope. And God knows what you cannot see. And God knows the opportunities you haven't encountered. And God knows the people you haven't met. And God knows the doors you haven't reached. And God knows the version of you that you are still becoming. And so keep trusting and keep preparing and keep moving. And you don't need to know exactly when your turn will come. And you don't need to know exactly how everything will happen. And you simply need to continue taking the next right step. And when fear tells you nothing is changing, remind yourself, and I may not see it yet, but I will not assume that nothing is happening. And when disappointment says it's over, tell yourself, and this chapter is difficult, but it is not the whole story. And when comparison says everyone else is ahead, remind yourself, and their journey is not my journey. And when your heart says maybe God has forgotten me, answer with confidence, and God has not forgotten me. My timing is still unfolding. And one day you may look back at this exact season and realize that you were stronger than you thought. And you were closer than you realized. And you were learning more than you understood. And the waiting that once frustrated you became part of the reason you were ready for what came next. And so don't give up because you cannot see the result yet. And don't abandon your dream because the timing is different from what you expected. And don't stop preparing because nobody is applauding you. and keep doing your part and keep trusting God and keep becoming better. And your life is not standing still simply because you cannot see immediate results. And sometimes the deepest work happens quietly. And when the right moment arrives, what was invisible can suddenly become visible. And so keep your heart steady and keep your mind focused and keep your faith strong and keep walking. And your story is not finished, and your season can change, and your opportunity can come, and your situation can turn around. And when it does, you may finally understand why God asked you to keep trusting when you could not see the way forward. And you are not forgotten, and you are being prepared. And keep trusting the process.